Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Full house here. Joe Samaniego, along with Kobe, Ben, Matt, Jonathan. Casey will be joining us later in the program for Sports Car, and we want to welcome all of our viewers tuning in on YouTube, across social media, from our regulars. Demas, thank you for tuning in. As always, a very exciting and chaotic race weekend. We'll recap it here. And also a big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show, Mark, Robin, and David, our newest one. You too can subscribe to our Patreon, invest in us each and every month. Help us get to the track more frequently. And of course, you could do one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee. Big thank you to Adam Stevens for 2 cups of coffee. He did a second one in the pre-race show. So definitely, you want to buy anyone in particular a cup of coffee, buy a coffee. Be sure you mention it in the message so we can get to that person coffee, because everyone here does a lot of hard work for you, the viewers. And it was a very crazy weekend. We had all sorts of action with Formula One, IMSA, NASCAR. Matthew, Formula One, that was the first one today, and I think that set a really hot, just continued the craziness we saw all weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like craziness might be an understatement from what we have seen from motorsport this past weekend. But like going back to like the pre-race show yesterday after we went off the air, qualifying for Formula One began, and there were really no big surprises until the second qualifying round, where Max Verstappen had a mechanical issue and could not make a lap in Q2. So he ended up starting in 15th place. I feel like that shocked a lot of us, especially here at Grid Network. Sergio Perez, his Red Bull teammate, was on the pole with Charles Leclerc and Fernando Alonso in the top 3. However, Charles Leclerc had a 10-place grid penalty, which brought Fernando Alonso to the front row. Alonso led 1 lap, but was handed a 5-second penalty for the incorrect starting position. It didn't matter, though, however, because as soon as Sergio Perez got around Alonso, he essentially just checked out. Sergio Perez won the race ahead of Max Verstappen, who made his way from 15th to 2nd place. Alonso came home 3rd, followed by both of the Mercedes and then both of the Ferraris. Both Alpines scored a point, as well as one Haas also scored a point. Red Bull is pulling seemingly well ahead of everyone. I don't think it's shocked us yet. And then under fortunate circumstances for Aston Martin, as Lance Stroll retired from the race early with mechanical issues. So I'm going to start with you for this one, Ben. We're 2 races in. Red Bull has a big lead over everyone, almost double the points. Which team do you feel is closest to claiming 2nd place in the constructors' standings?
Matthew, Jonathan, Kobe. I think it's Aston Martin. I got to eat crow. I know I ate crow 2 weeks ago. This was no fluke. Fernando Alonso finally got lucky and changed teams at the right place at the right time. It's working out for him. I think Aston Martin are far and away the best of the rest after Red Bull, who are clearly so far ahead of everybody else. It's been remarkable to me, the turnaround that they've made over the last couple of years. And now to have Alonso coming in, obviously a 2-time world champion, somebody who's been desperate for a good car over the last several years in Formula One, just hasn't been able to be in the right place at the right time until right now. I would not put a win past Fernando Alonso the way he's driving. He is looking absolutely spectacular. As far as I'm concerned, that's the 3rd best car on the grid right now behind Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. The 2nd best car, I guess I should say, Alonso being the 3rd best driver. He is just on a whole nother level right now. It looks like the Fernando Alonso of 10 years ago. It's just been spectacular, and it's great to see a name like Alonso, an absolute legend of the sport, back where he belongs, fighting for podiums. I know we're going to get a little bit into that discussion here a little bit later on as to the podium that he had and then didn't have and then had again. But my goodness, Aston Martin just are on a whole nother level this year compared to where they've been recently. Mercedes, I think, are a little bit better than a lot of people were expecting them to be this weekend. I think they're solidly 3rd place right now. We got to talk about Ferrari, though. Where were Ferrari this weekend? 6th and 7th, they were just absolute no-shows. And I think, changing team principals has not been an overnight fix for that team. They clearly have a lot of issues that they still need to work out. I see Adam Lemery says he's feeling the same way. Aston Martin strong, Alonso with 100 podiums. And, of course, Demas, Max Verstappen coming from 15th. He nearly got me a pick a winner point today anyway. He's the class of the field right now. There's no doubt. But after the Red Bulls, I owe Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin a massive apology for what I said at the end of last year. They have been spectacular. and they deserve all the credit in the world for that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. That Aston Martin's really improved. And I was thinking at the end of the race, Sebastian Vettel has to be punching the air right now with how good Fernando Alonso is doing out there. And Lance Stroll also doing well. But also, I don't think you can underestimate Mercedes in the way that they are. George Russell is a phenomenal talent. Lewis Hamilton is Lewis Hamilton. And I think that once they start to get things figured out and get more consistent, I think they're going to really be ahead of Aston Martin, what they're doing. But also, too, I think Ferrari needs some time to work out some of the bugs that they have going on, because they showed good speed in the first week. This week, they weren't there quite as much. So I'm just impressed with what Aston Martin's doing, though.
Yeah, totally, Jonathan. I'm also impressed with Aston Martin. To see a team, looking where they were running in 2022 and make the big jump that they made this year, that is absolutely remarkable. Typically, we see Formula One teams make a little progress from season to season, but to make such a big jump where you're literally, the next best team behind Red Bull, that is super, super impressive. And it's unfortunate, Lance Stroll wasn't able to have the day that he wanted today, because Lance was looking really, really, really strong, just like Fernando Alonso. And if Lance Stroll hadn't retired from the race, it would have been a very, very good points day for Aston. I think they have a lot to be proud of, and it's going to be fun watching to see how that team does throughout the remainder of the season. And if Red Bull, Max, and Checo have a bad day, it would not surprise me if we see Fernando Alonso return to the top step of the podium for the first time in a very, very long time, or even see Lance Stroll win a race in Formula One.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was reading on Twitter, this is Alonso's first season with the podium since like 2014 or something, or back-to-back since like 2015.
First with 2 podiums, I think.
Sorry. Yes, yeah. First with 2 podiums.
He did get the one in Qatar with Alpine in 21.
And what I'm going to segue into that is Ben and I have been sharing some crow about our comments about Aston Martin this season. I remember saying Alonso's going to hit the 100 podiums, but it's going to be over the course of the season. He did it in 2 races. So unfortunately, I have to eat there. But at the same time, in terms of claiming second place, I kind of agree with Jonathan in the sense where I feel like Mercedes, we're treating them like they're where AlphaTauri and McLaren are, with no points, but in reality, Mercedes is tied for second with Aston Martin. I mean, I think what is going to be that deciphering battle is the overall talent and experience, more so the talent in the sides. I mean, Fernando Alonso, one of the best to ever do it, compared to Lewis Hamilton, one of the best to ever do it. George Russell, young, upcoming. Lance Stroll, also young and upcoming. However, I feel like Russell has the edge over Stroll, which I think over the course of a season might put Mercedes in second in constructors. But then again, you have Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz with Ferrari, 2 drivers who can easily put that team up as soon as they figure their issues out. I mean, they're, I believe, 28 points. We saw 26, 28 points. And then both Aston Martin and Mercedes at 38. So I think it's going to be a fun battle for second. It really is. Unfortunately, we're just giving Red Bull so much credit already, but we haven't seen any wind tunnel thing or effects of that 10% penalty. We won't for quite a while. Yeah, so it was 26. I apologize. But going into the driver who I feel like all the focus was on that was not in a Red Bull was Fernando Alonso. So crosses the finish line. It looked like he had his 100th podium. But after he and all the drivers finished the podium ceremonies, another penalty came. A 10-second penalty for incorrectly serving the 5-second penalty under the safety car. This reminds me a little bit of the driver we're also going to mention in a couple minutes. But the 5-second penalty was originally for Alonso being in the incorrect position on the grid. However, once again, the penalty was reversed with Alonso going back into third, back to the podium, and becoming the 6th driver to ever reach 100 podiums in Formula One. And there's a lot of Uno reverse, a lot of stuff going on. So I'm going to start with you on this one, Jonathan. Do you agree with both penalties? And do you think the FIA being really strict on the grid because of last week due to Esteban Ocon, who I aforementioned, was the first penalized for the grid lineup, and he had to keep going penalty. So how do you feel about that one, Jonathan?
Yeah, I don't know. When it comes to F1, it seems like there is a lot of penalties laid down for random, like various things that of course are in the rule book, but in other motorsports would not be a penalty. Like something like this, if you're talking NASCAR, would not be a penalty. So I don't know. to me, I could understand how someone would be very confused watching the race going, okay, is Alonso going to get that penalty? What's that penalty going to be? The announcers even being kind of confused of what was going on. So, in all, I think, gosh, it's like the FIA they kind of have their hands tied because they don't want to get in the way of the racing, but also too, they have to enforce the rules. But it's all balls and strikes, and they had a lot of those today, and I would not want to be in their position. We'll put it that way.
Well, it's not whose line is it anyway, because at least the points still matter, but it seemed like everything was made up today. And I've said this on this show before, I get very, very frustrated with petty little things like this in Formula One. I think this is what turns a lot of people off. Fernando Alonso, and I must confess, I didn't catch the immediate start of the race. I understand he took the lead on the start. So if he was out of position on the grid, if he was slightly forward or whatever, he gets a 5-second penalty for that. That's fine. I understand that. Alonso comes in, he serves the penalty, and they decide, well, the jack was touching the car before the 5 seconds was up. So we're going to tack on 10 more because you didn't serve your 5-second penalty completely 100% per the rule book correctly, even though the jack was really just touching the car. So, I mean, how much of an advantage is that anyway? But you still get 10 seconds. But we're not going to give you the 10 seconds until after the race is over, even though we could have given it to you within 35 laps of the closing laps of the race, or before your podium ceremony when you celebrated your milestone 100th podium with your team, when we could have let George Russell celebrate his podium if it's really his podium, because you're going to get the penalty. Oh, wait a second. Actually, we're getting a lot of backlash for this. Maybe we shouldn't have given you the penalty, so we're going to take the penalty back and give you back your 100th podium. I mean, it's just asinine. It's just absolutely crazy. And like I said, this isn't a new issue. I said this. I remember I was sitting in the Scott radio booth at Gordon College when I hosted my podcast there. This is going way back 4 or 5 years now. I think it was Brazil 2019 when Carlos Sainz got promoted to the podium after they penalized Lewis Hamilton. And we were just saying, you've got to penalize Lewis right away. If you're going to do it, you can't rob Carlos Sainz of the opportunity to celebrate, and McLaren as well, because they hadn't had a podium in forever at that point as well. You can't rob them of the opportunity to actually be up there on the podium, taking in the atmosphere, soaking it all in, and celebrating with the team. I know they got to take some pictures later, but it wasn't the same. It's not the same as actually getting to go through the ceremonies and go through the process there. So all this confusion, I think, again, it's stuff like this that turns off particularly casual fans that see a race result and see a car cross the line in third place. But because the jack was touching the car a little bit too soon after a penalty was already given, we're going to tack on 10 more seconds. But then a couple of hours later, after they protest or after there's backlash, we're going to take it back. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. And to base on, I think you make absolutely point. One thing I was very excited and waiting for was to hear what you were about to say, Ben, because I know talking in group me and stuff like that. I was just more confused. I feel like these keyboard warriors Mike Joy was talking about, I feel like that's who bullied the FIA into putting Alonso back onto the podium, because everything you saw on Twitter really did make sense. It was kind of asinine, like what you said. The fact that it took 35 laps or something along those lines to really figure out this penalty, even after him celebrating a historic moment, something we have only seen 6 times ever happen in the sport. So I can definitely agree with both of you in the sense where it was just like, what is going on? And then if they allowed Esteban Ocon to do that and then penalize him after, probably would have finished much higher than he did. So it kind of, you look back on it, like just inconsistency. I know we make fun of NASCAR for being inconsistently inconsistent in that sense, but at the same time, you look at the FIA and what they're doing in Formula One, you're like, oh, well, they're doing the same thing, just in a different kind of form. But
well, even if you agree with the penalty, I think Fernando even said it himself. You had 35 laps to put the penalty into effect, and then even after the race, I mean, I feel like there should be some sort of cap, like NASCAR has the 90-minute disqualification thing or whatever, post-race tech. Like, we particularly for the winner and for the top 3, because you're celebrating on the podium, if you can't make that decision within 5 minutes after the race, it's probably borderline enough that if it's going to take you that long, it's probably not worth penalizing in the first place. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But it's asinine. You just, like you said, Matthew, continue to go back and forth in circles like this and, give these penalties out this late and then take them back anyway. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
I could imagine like the social media editors for F1 and like Aston Martin having to upload the graphic and then having to come back and be like, oh crap, got to archive it. But then all of a sudden it's back up because they changed their mind after waiting so long to change their mind. But talking about inconsistent and really they're just not being up there. One team looking far from the front this season is McLaren, which Ben, you previously mentioned them and their podium back in 2019. With Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, Oscar outqualified and actually finished ahead of Lando Norris. This is the first time that has happened to Lando. I know listening to the driver's radio, they pretty much told Oscar to go, like pretty much told Lando to go, or Lando to let Oscar around. I had both those names for some reason would not come off the tongue. But ahead of them, both cars were Alpine in the points. So good for them on that side. And then we all remember the summer of McLaren where they were signing drivers and then having all these contract disputes. But McLaren was always up towards the front last season. Even Lando had a podium. He was actually the only non-Ferrari, Red Bull, or Mercedes to get on the podium. Something we've seen in this era where three teams dominate. Now what we're seeing from Aston Martin, I feel like McLaren was in that position last season. But I'm going to start with you for this one, Ben. Looking back on it, how shocking is it to see McLaren be one of only two teams this season not to score any points so far?
Yeah, it feels like ancient history that Lando Norris could have won a race in Russia in Formula One if the rain had just held off for 10 more minutes. It's shocking. I was just pulling up the constructor standings here. That 15th place finish today, their best finish of the year. I know it's only 2 races in, but man, it could not have been a worse start to the year, really, for McLaren here. I mean, it's been absolutely dreadful. I feel bad for Lando Norris, who's, kind of a seasoned veteran now. He's been in Formula One for the last few years and still, of course, looking for his maiden win. Came very close at Monza in 2021 and Russia in 2021 as well. But he's not going to win a race if McLaren keep performing like this. I mean, something has got to change over there to get back to where we know they can be, which for the last decade really has been the class of the midfield, and even being able to sneak in a win there in a 1-2 in 2021 with Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris there. So it's been very surprising to me. I didn't expect them to be, the class of the midfield even this year. Certainly not what Aston Martin is doing right now, which of course we touched on earlier. They've just been, on another level, compared to the rest of the midfield in recent years. But to see McLaren dead last in the constructors right now, pretty surprising.
Yeah, certainly, Ben. I'm also surprised by McLaren as well. And one thing that we need to think about, if McLaren is unable to give Lando Norris a competitive car, does Lando start looking elsewhere to another Formula One team that can potentially give him a car that can go out there and contend for podiums and wins on a regular basis, rather than just these random races where you see something really crazy happen, like when Esteban Ocon and end up winning in an Alpine. Yeah, so McLaren it is very, very surprising that they haven't really shown a good form so far to start off 2023. And yes, it's still early. We'll see how they develop the car throughout the year, but right now things are not going well at all. And I really wonder what Lando Norris's long-term future is going to be with that organization, because like you said, Ben, Lando is a seasoned veteran now, been in Formula One for several seasons. He was highly touted coming out of Formula 2. A lot of people think that he could be up there winning races at some point, but if McLaren's not going to be able to give him the car capable of doing that, I really think he could start looking elsewhere. Oscar Piastri, another highly touted young driver, I think he could have a great Formula One career, and if Oscar doesn't think McLaren's going to give him a best chance long term, he may eventually start looking elsewhere as well. It's been a while since we've seen McLaren as a top team in F1.
Yeah, absolutely, and then it makes you wonder, where would Lando Norris go? I mean, in a few years, you're thinking Lewis Hamilton's getting to that point. I know he said in some lie detector test they put that he doesn't want to stop till he gets his 8th championship, but I feel it might not happen with how Mercedes and this W14 have been going. Does Lando maybe replace Hamilton in 2 years at Mercedes? Does he go to Ferrari? Does a spot open up, maybe sign? It's going to be a fun, silly season in a few years. Like, not right this second. It's too early to talk about that, but I think in a few years we'll be able to get there. But I think it's also shocking. I mean, McLaren, you hear the history of the sport, how great they've been, and then just lately they've just not really been up there in terms of I don't want to say being relevant, but like when you're one of the last two teams to score, when having Lando Norris on your team, I feel like there's an issue, especially with the young talent as well and Oscar Piastri. But I assume they'll score points eventually this season. Not sure when it's going to happen. And then talking about points, heading into it, Haas and AlphaTauri were actually battling each other for the final point today. I think that was one of the best battles, honestly, between 9th and 10th for those final few laps, where Yuki Tsunoda actually lost the position to the Haas and Kevin Magnussen. Nico Hulkenberg finished 12th, and he was looking like a true midfield contender, had a couple great qualifying efforts out of him coming back to Formula One. And team principal Franz Trost says he didn't trust his engineers after the AlphaTauri failed to meet these expectations. And talking about AlphaTauri, they are actually, besides McLaren, the only other team this season who has yet to score a point. For some reason, last week I thought they did. Very close, didn't get it done. Same thing this week, very close, didn't get it done. So starting with you, Kobe, could this cause problems within the AlphaTauri team and hurt both drivers with these comments that were said?
Well, it's never a good thing when the team boss is calling out engineers within the team because it clearly shows that there's some tensions that are going on. And, AlphaTauri, we certainly expect to see a lot more out of them. And you remember it was just a few years ago, they were winning at Monza with Pierre Gasly. And right now, just being able to finish on a podium would be a dream come true for AlphaTauri. And they are very, very far off where they were when Gasly ended up winning Monza. So right now, Yuki Tsunoda, Nick DeVries, they just have to do the best that they can with the car that they got. Unfortunately, the design that with this year's AlphaTauri is not really that great. So they're really going to be operating with a handful this season.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think it definitely doesn't instill confidence within the drivers because, we've seen many times where in order for a driver to do well, they have to have a team behind them and have confidence. And that's not really instilling confidence in the team. And honestly, I think it's something that should be handled internally. But I guess that shows you how internal matters probably have gone if they're going public with something like this. But yeah, I think it's going to be a long season for AlphaTauri, just like it is probably going to be for Williams. It's going to be just about rebuilding, and trying to make things better for the future. And it's just kind of one of those cases where you just have to grin and bear through it. It's kind of, and it's kind of just one of those things you have to do. Aston Martin, we saw them kind of at a similar way, and now look at how they're doing. So ultimately, just got to get through it. Just got to keep pushing and keep pressing.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree with both of that. I think, just getting into Formula One Drive to Survive, hearing the stuff that Gunther Stein has said about his Haas drivers and the engineers to their face, this might have a little bit of a shakeup considering how Haas has kind of went on a little bit of a downhill in more recent memory. So it's very unfortunate to see. And I know that Drive to Survive Season 6, whenever I get there, but whenever it releases, it's going to be interesting to see the reaction to the comments that were said. Obviously, that's a long time from now, but it'll be pretty cool to see. And definitely, talking about AlphaTauri not scoring points, the rookies, I just wanted to mention that we talked about highly with Oscar Piastri, Logan Sargent, and Nick DeVries. I don't believe any of them have scored points yet this season. There's only been 6-ish drivers on the grid who haven't scored. Oh, thank you. Perfect timing for the graphic. So, yeah, 6 drivers have not scored. 7, I can't count. But yet the rookies are all down there. So I think that's very interesting to see. So just wanted to point that out. It's the Rookie of the Year battles still equal. So that's pretty fun to see. But going into somebody who is definitely not a rookie, we talked about Fernando Alonso, his penalty. George Russell, one of the younger guys on the grid, took the podium, went up to the 3rd step. This would have put him ahead of both Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. He would have had 21 points. But however, he got pushed back to 4th after being up to 3rd and then back to 4th again. He now sits 6th with 18 points instead of being in 4th with 21 points. And now, like I had said, with Lewis Hamilton and Sainz, they are tied for 4th, 20 points apiece. Sainz for Ferrari, he never really was a factor today here in Saudi Arabia, or he really didn't have the pace as his teammate Charles Leclerc did. So I'm going to start with you on this one, Jonathan. We're going to be talking about both these drivers. If Russell was to be ahead of Sainz in points with arguably a less superior car, do you think this would add pressure on Carlos Sainz to perform even better than he has?
No, I don't think so. As we already talked about, Ferrari has been having their issues and trying to get on a good pace this season. And I think that's just a product of it. It seems like Mercedes, even though they aren't as well performing as, Aston Martin and Red Bull, they seem to be better than Ferrari right now at this point. So I don't think it's anything that, any shade on Sainz versus Russell. If anything, I think Sainz has been doing a perfectly good job with what he's been dealt this season so far. But yeah, I don't think it's anything.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't even know if we can accurately say less superior car at this point. Like I was saying, where were Ferrari today? I think it's been a very disappointing start to the year for them as well. Again, by Ferrari standards, I'm sure McLaren would love to be where Ferrari are right now, and as would Haas and AlphaTauri and a couple of other teams like that as well. But you expect Ferrari to be fighting for wins and world championships, and they still haven't won a world championship of any kind since 2008, and they haven't won a driver since 2007. So, I think, like I said, the Mercedes I think is a little bit stronger than Lewis Hamilton, George Russell were giving it credit for going into this weekend. Ferrari, like I said, there's that old saying, what can go wrong will go wrong until they prove me otherwise. I don't know if the pressure is really on Sainz right now as the driver. There's only so much he can do if Ferrari aren't giving him, or Charles Leclerc for that matter, a car that's capable of going out there and competing for wins on a regular basis. I think they still have some work to do to get to that point first.
Yeah, surely, and there's definitely gonna be a lot of pressure on their teams to deliver for the drivers. And as you well said, Ben, I believe it was on Twitter, Ferrari are the Dallas Cowboys of Formula One because they have so the expectations are so high for them, and for like over the last decade and a little bit longer, they haven't been able to deliver. It's been such a long time since they've been able to get the drivers' title and the constructors' title. So they're certainly there's always been that pressure on Ferrari. They haven't delivered in a while. And, with Fred Vasseur coming on as team principal, replacing Mattia Binotto, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him as well. And although I think it's still a little too soon to start looking at Fred Vasseur, because I think we need to give him time to really put his signature on Ferrari, make all the changes, because a lot of things going to this car that was under Mattia Binotto. So as the season goes on, they start looking towards 2024. I think once we get into next season, then we can start seeing if Frederick Vasseur is going to be able to help take Ferrari back to its glory days. But looking at things right now, they're a very, very long way off to getting there.
Well, if you watch First Take, you know that there's Stephen A. Smith has that song "Accident" waiting to happen whenever he talks about the Dallas Cowboys, and the lyrics just work so perfectly for Ferrari too. For the last decade and a half, they've made me laugh. All the talent that they've had, it's unbelievable, man. It's been a decade and a half, literally 2023, going back to 2008, since they were title contenders. So, I mean, it's unbelievable.
I like that analogy, Dallas Cowboys of F1. That's a funny one.
Most glamorous franchise, high expectations. What can go wrong will go wrong.
Yeah, I was just thinking off the top of my head. It seems like it's been Red Bull, Mercedes every single year since 2010 have won the championship. So, and Ferrari, they're just thinking about the talent they've had, either whether it's Vettel, whether it was Raikkonen, whether it was, I drew a blank, Alonso, all this talent, Leclerc, and they still have not won. So I think that's definitely something. So I don't know if we can throw that much pressure on Carlos Sainz. Because, I mean, granted, we look at him as the number 2 driver. I think most people do at Ferrari. But he is still currently ahead of Charles Leclerc in points. I know it's only 2 races. Obviously, Leclerc was in a podium position before his engine issue or mechanical issue what happened. But I don't think we give Sainz enough credit. I think him and Russell are in that same aspect where their teammates might overshadow them in a sense, but they're right up there with them, and they have been for a little bit. So that's why I would say I don't know if this adds pressure for Sainz to perform, considering of how good Russell has been doing since he moved over, moved over to Mercedes, but you never know. But I mean, that's our discussion a little bit about Formula One when you're in Saudi Arabia this week. Next race is the Australian Grand Prix. It will be the April 1st and 2nd weekend. This actually is the same weekend as the grid ranking, the week 1. Finally, I've been writing about it. Every tagline says it will be released April 1st, April 2nd weekend. Finally, it will be coming when we see the next Formula One race. Also, a reminder to everyone, on April 12th, the Grid Endurance Performance Index, the EPI for short, that will be released. And we are going to now switch it over. We talked about Formula One, the first race of the day, the second race of the day, the NASCAR Cup Series, some action from Atlanta Motor Speedway. So I'm going to throw it over to Ben for this one.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, while the Cup Series is the focus of attention for today's show, there are some notable news items to address before we get into the Encore show tomorrow. Of course, Josh Williams was parked by NASCAR in the Xfinity race yesterday and parked his car on the start-finish line under caution in protest. There's no update yet on NASCAR handing down penalties. That will likely happen on Tuesday or during the middle of the week. So if that does, we'll have a full report on Grid tonight on Wednesday. And of course, you can catch our recap of the Craftsman Truck and Xfinity Series races in Atlanta, as well as Formula 2 in Saudi Arabia tomorrow on YouTube at Grid Live Encore, 7 p.m. right here on the Grid YouTube channel. Both races were marred by lengthy cautions and drivers critical of the repaved and reconfigured Atlanta Super Speedway, if you will. But we move on now to the Cup Series today. We occasionally saw single file racing up against the wall, similar to Daytona, Talladega. Maybe the Cup drivers watched the races yesterday and learned a little bit and just wanted to get home to the end and didn't push it too hard of a start. There was only one caution for a crash in Stage 1 when Bubba Wallace spun in a single car accident. Stage 3, on the other hand, had 2 cautions for crashes. Only the second race this year, but didn't end in overtime. Joey Logano dueled with Brad Keselowski and won after leading the most laps. Jonathan, we'll go to you first. After a rough West Coast swing for Logano, are you surprised at how he controlled the race today?
Not really, because, we saw at Daytona how the Fords were so strong until that late race wreck that they had at the end there. And then even in overtime where Joey Logano was racing side by side with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. for the win. And just in general, Penske Fords have been very, very strong at the super speedway. So I'm not really surprised. I was surprised at how Brad Keselowski showed a lot of speed out there just on his own, even after his teammate got taken out in that wreck. We saw him on the outside lane, really able to command the lead from the outside there. But again, Joey Logano, very strong today. He pulled that inside lane on almost on his own. I mean, he had to back up to his Penske teammates to get some help, and of course, get a consistent run going. But a lot of strength, a lot of what Logano's shown over the last couple of weeks finally came to fruition, and it was a big win for him.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with Jonathan 100%. I don't think it's surprising. I mean, this is 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion Joey Logano we're talking about. And like Adam Lemery says, Ford were simply dominant at Atlanta. Truly thought Brad K was going to win. He will. And Dima says, finally, Joey Logano wins. I can agree with that. I feel like the way Joey Logano has been, he might have had a little bit of struggles, but we have to keep in the back of our minds, this is last season's champion in the Cup Series level. He's won it twice in the most recent, I believe, 5 years. 2018. So for Joey Logano, I'm not surprised that he led 140 of the 260 laps, 53.8% of the race off the top of my head. So, I mean, just the command, even like what Jonathan said with Brad Keselowski, I don't really know if there's two better guys to control a pack, control the draft as those two former Penske teammates. Now, Brad, obviously, team owner, team driver for Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. So it doesn't surprise me. What surprises me, though, I know Ben mentioned it on Twitter. He mentioned me. I appreciate that. I remember talking about Logano and his sponsorship. I think the most surprising thing is that this is Logano's 32nd career Cup Series win, his 31st win with Team Penske. But this actually marks the only time in Joey Logano's Cup Series career with Penske that Shell and Pennzoil were not his primary sponsor for the win. Auto Trader, this is the first time that they've won as the primary sponsor on his car. I thought that was the most shocking thing I think I saw all weekend, because I remember, I think I have to eat crow because I remember like, oh, he's not going to win this track. He's not going to win this track. And you guys were like, why? I'm like, well, because Shell and Pennzoil aren't on the car, on the hood. But he did it. So good for Joey Logano. Very happy for him. Finally, for those fans of non-Chevrolets, Ford got it done, ending that streak at four straight wins for the team. So tying, obviously, what we have seen in previous years, I believe 2001. But yes, I was not surprised because it's Joey Logano. At the end of the day, I was more surprised about that whole sponsorship fun fact.
Well, let's catch up on the chat here. I understand we have some comments coming in. Chrome Diesel says, I never liked the new Atlanta. I feel once surface ages, it will become the 1.5 mile version of Darlington. Of course, we'll discuss a lot more about that on the Encore show tomorrow as well. Behind the mic says Josh Williams might be my new hero. I've got some mixed feelings on what Josh Williams did. I understand why people are loving it in the moment, but there's also a part of me that wonders if, like, say, Kyle Busch or Bubba Wallace had done that in today's Cup race, would we be making the same arguments here, having the same feelings about it? I think, who Josh Williams is, obviously a lovable underdog of the Xfinity Series. People are really getting into it, so we'll get into it more on the Encore show as well, obviously, tomorrow. And then Adam Lemery says, what are your thoughts on Gunther Steiner being an analyst in the Cup Series race at COTA next week? Again, I think it's one of those things that's going to be fun on paper. Obviously, it's a little bit outside Gunther's world, not COTA, that is, obviously, but, the NASCAR side of things, being known for, what he does over with Haas and F1. Of course, he did do some stuff with NASCAR several years ago when they had the Red Bull when Red Bull had their NASCAR program. So not totally a foreign world, but certainly not something that he's been a part of over the last recent few years here. So I think it's going to be an interesting experience, but maybe we should wait and see how it goes before we judge it one way or the other. But that's my thoughts on what we're going to see at COTA next week. Jonathan, I don't know if you had something you wanted to follow up with real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to say Gunther Steiner, it's cool to see he's going to be in the booth for COTA. I think that really capitalizes on the crossover appeal of F1 and NASCAR, because we're all motorsports. We're talking about motorsports right now. Let's bring those two worlds together. I think that's a good initiative. And about Josh Williams, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens on Tuesday, because just looking at it from the rules book, the rule book standpoint, and the way NASCAR responded to it, I think they see this as a very serious offense. Like it really put like the safety of the event and safety of competitors, safety of Josh in question. So I think they see it from that aspect, and we might see some interesting stuff come out this week, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to speculate on any of that.
Yeah, again, obviously we'll save most of it for tomorrow. But again, that's one of those things where, like, if it happens in a movie or a film or something, I think it's a really cool, epic scene there. But when you think about it in real life, you park your car on a hot racetrack and walk across the infield on a hot racetrack, I think a fine is coming his way for sure. Although maybe it's coming Denny Hamlin's way now that I think about it based on the tweet that he sent out. But we'll see if they throw a suspension down there as well. I think that would certainly be controversial, no matter what happens, either way going there on that decision. But we'll just have to wait and see. And Chrome Diesel, another good point as well. Yeah, something I think a lot of people are looking forward to when it comes to COTA. Excited to see a stage race without cautions. And then, of course, Jenson Button and Kimi Räikkönen as well being in the field, as well as Jordan Taylor, a couple of other ringers. I think Connor Daly might be back for the money team. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think he's planning to be there, as well as Jimmy Johnson. So star-studded field for Circuit of the Americas coming up here next week. Now, let's get back to the Atlanta race. Brad Keselowski, of course, desperate for a win. He thought he had it and led the field to get the last lap, but he was blocking Logano, late blocking really the entire field there for those last several laps. Almost hung on, but Logano got him at the end. Ford, either way, would have gotten their first win of 2023 and a driver in the playoffs. Now, shifting to Hendrick Motorsports, obviously they've been in the news quite a bit recently. William Byron and Kyle Larson both crashed out today. Alex Bowman's top 10 streak ended today at Atlanta as well. So, Matthew, I'll go to you first on this one. For Hendrick, considering you've got substitute crew chiefs in there with these penalties and everything, does that change where we should expect the team to be running over these next few weeks?
I want to say yes, absolutely, because I don't know if this is the best kind of race to judge the whole crew chief driver thing, considering it's like technically a super speedway. But at the same time, now looking at all these drivers so far down in points, I think the least surprising thing, though, was Alex Bowman reuniting with his former crew chief and then being ahead of the rest of them, because I'm pretty sure every other Hendrick car had wrecked out. So I think this does change your expectation. I mean, going into this race, or even last race, when William Byron just absolutely dominates, Kyle Larson absolutely dominates, and Alex Bowman being the only driver in the top 10, like most underrated driver, I feel like, with that team at the moment. You see it. You see this change. I don't know if Atlanta's the best track to judge this on, especially without the crew chiefs. But I think going into COTA, then going into weeks following that, we'll probably get a better judgment. But it's definitely going to be something interesting to see. I think the best team in NASCAR arguably falling all the way down in points, being behind certain drivers you would never say in your head that they would be behind. So I think, yes, this definitely does lower the expectation. But knowing what we're saying right now, Jordan Taylor is going to probably go win COTA, something like that. It's really just going to to eat crow. I think that's the term they're going to make it happen probably. And I'll be ready for it. I really will be.
It would be epic to see Jordan Taylor win in his Cup
That would
Series
be
debut.
awesome.
Jonathan, go ahead.
Matthew said Atlanta's Atlanta, but I want to share this stat. So in the last 2 races, there were 588 laps run. All but 82 of those laps were led by Hendrick Motorsports cars. And today at Atlanta, they did not lead a single lap. So I think that was very striking, but also too, when you consider how fast the Fords were and have been on the super speedways, I don't know. You can't really judge, a team's performance based on a super speedway. When we get to COTA, I still don't think it's going to be the team's going to be very far off of how they've been, because look, the guys who are stepping into these positions, they're not novices. We may not know the names Tom Gray and Brian Camp, but Tom Gray, he's the lead race engineer for Chase Elliott's team. He's been with a key part of the team, for many, many years. You look at Brian Camp, he's a technical director. He has his fingers in all the internal workings of the team. And Kevin Meendering, he filled in for Cliff Daniels last year. He worked with Jimmy Johnson, Greg Ives, who Alex Bowman's worked with, who Dale Jr.'s worked with. Hendrick Motorsports is a big enough team to where something like this happens and they just kind of take their medicine. They know they have good people to put in those places and to continue being strong. And plus, too, that's not even mentioning how, the guys are probably texting each other, hey, what should I do? Or, consulting with the crew chiefs if they get in a bind, say 10 to go. Do I pit for tires? Do I do this? Kind of chatting back and forth. So I think that, yeah, it is something to say, okay, Hendrick Motorsports might not be on their game, but with how good Hendrick Motorsports is, I think they'll still be on their game. And I still think they're going to be out there contending for wins, and they're still going to be as strong as ever.
Now, while on the note of communication after the race, Brad Keselowski commented that respect between him and Joey Logano was not to wreck anyone at the end of the race. Of course, they were teammates at Penske for many years, so they have a tremendous amount of respect for each other, I'm sure. But on Friday, Kyle Busch said that there's a lack of respect between the drivers in the current climate. So, Jonathan, I'll put this question on your plate here, since you were at the West Coast swing races for the racing experts. Do you feel there's a lack of respect between the drivers in a different culture compared to years past?
Well, I think Kyle was making more of a comment. I believe it was Kyle Busch, correct? That made that comment. Kyle was making more of a general comment because, you look at around 2008, 2009, when Joey Logano first came into the sport. Now, he's going to be a crucial factor in the point I'm going to make here, but, you saw it was kind of a gentleman's agreement, very orderly racing. You didn't do certain things. You didn't take the air off of guys, quarter panels or do different things like that. Once Logano came in, I think he kind of changed everything, basically to where he was very aggressive. He did the things that other drivers did not, and he was successful in doing it. He made a lot of the veterans mad. You had Kyle Busch, who was mad at Joey Logano. You had Brad Keselowski, or not Brad Keselowski, excuse me, Denny Hamlin and others who were mad at Joey Logano for what he did. And it really created a culture shift. And I think that's what Kyle's talking about, to where you now have drivers coming up who learned from that style of racing and that school of thought. But also, too, I think it relates to the Denny Hamlin incident that happened with Ross Chastain, about how Denny said straight up on his podcast that I knew I was going to be going straight into the corner. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take you with me. And also the 3 and 4 wide racing through the dog leg, where everybody fans out and everything and doesn't give each other room. I think that's where Kyle's comments were coming from more. Just that there isn't the same type of respect that there used to be, that everybody races each other so hard all the time, which honestly, I think is also the nature of this format as well. So yeah.
Well, like I said, we'll talk much more about this on the Encore show tomorrow, I think, in terms of what the new Atlanta looks like. But as for the Cup race today, most of the race was single file up front. Temperatures were in the 40s. Usually lower temperatures means more grip. However, after last year, a harder tire was brought in by Goodyear. The pavement's now a year older, of course, so not as grippy as it was when it was brand new and fresh. Matthew, were you surprised by how the race played out compared to Saturday's races?
yes and no in a sense. Yes, because I feel like it was kind of a crap show for most of the race up until the finish. I think NASCAR is very lucky that they finished this race under green instead of finishing in overtime or under caution. I was actually surprised that there weren't as many wrecks. I'm not going to lie, especially with the uncertainty of this next-gen car, even 40-something races into the history of it, with all the wrecks and everything happening. I was quite surprised. It was more of like, from a fan perspective, it was just watching the single file line. At a point, I'm pretty sure all 36 cars were in the same line, even the guys that were laps down. Obviously, Bubba Wallace was at least multiple laps down the entire race from lap 10 to lap 200. And was it 40? Yes, something like that. Anyway, besides the point. A lot of it felt kind of like boring. It wasn't as action-packed, but at the same time, I am very happy that it wasn't. Even though we consider it maybe a crapshoot, how boring it was in terms of the single file racing, it was still significantly better than the Truck Series race, better than the Xfinity Series race. Besides, the Xfinity Series race finish was pretty cool nonetheless, but I would much rather see what happened the single file line than all the destroyed cars, all the accidents, all the cautions. Man, this Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, even like going back to ARCA at Phoenix, you really see the jump in this sport with how they race each other, how they respect each other. ARCA's way down because they're young drivers. Obviously, the majority of the field is younger than all three of us. Then the Truck Series, a lot of them are young, but at the same time, it's still low. Then the Xfinity Series is a huge jump, but I feel like in terms of what we saw at the Cup level, it's through the ceiling. It really is just in terms of the difference in how they race each other on that respectable level. So I really would argue that it doesn't surprise me in the sense I really thought that it was going to be more wreck and stuff like that, though. I would argue like a wreck fest. Honestly, I'm very happy it wasn't. I love to see. Actually, at the end, really, the majority of the cars did wreck. So unfortunately, I have to take that back, that statement. But it was surprised in the sense, and then not surprised in the sense. I'm going to stop talking. I definitely want to hear your guys' answers on this one, though.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to use the word boring because I don't think the race was boring. I think it was refreshing to see not as many cautions in the race compared to the last 2 days. But I think it's because these guys have figured out how to run the Gen 7 car. We saw it at Phoenix, we saw it at Las Vegas, we saw it Auto Club, Daytona. These guys have figured out the car and how to run with it. And honestly, this package has really lended itself to cleaner racing because we saw at Talladega last April about how they had a long run to the checkers. And I think it's good because, these teams are on, some of these teams are on thin budgets, where they're, you have a couple wrecked race cars and that really puts a strain on the teams. So it's good. I think it's good for everybody whenever you have a good, clean race like that. And it's not like it wasn't completely, snooze fest, boring race here. Now, let's not put that out there in the world because, we saw a perfectly good racing toward the end between Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski and seeing what each of them were going to do with the lanes. It was a good race. It was a very good race, a good, refreshing race after some of the, and, also too, the respect thing, I think that's what those series are for, though. Mm-hmm. You kind of, it's not a very clear feeder system, but it's kind of become that way over the years where as you go up the ladder, you vet the drivers as you go through. The best of the best make it to the top. So inevitably, you're going to get the best racing when you get to the top.
Definitely.
I think the Gluck poll is going to be very interesting this week because I think this new track is very, it's got very mixed reviews and mixed reactions from people. But like I said at the start, I'm wondering if maybe, there's two factors here. Obviously, there's a maturity factor with the Cup drivers as opposed to Xfinity and trucks. And then also looking at the two races that we saw yesterday and saying, maybe we should be content to ride in a single file train for a little bit here and make sure we get to the end. Of course, we did have that one bigger accident towards the end there in stage 3. But, I think that those both played a role. So I can't say I was too shocked. I'm glad. I certainly will take today over what we had yesterday in trucks and Xfinity in terms of a racing product. But again, I think, and it's just been a common theme that I've had. I haven't been a huge fan of the end result of these last few reconfigurations, thinking back to tracks like Phoenix and Texas certainly as well. I do miss the old Atlanta. I know Joe was saying backstage before we even got on that he misses the old Atlanta before that, the first time they reconfigured it. So it'll be interesting to see. This will be a nice segue, I guess, into our final question here as we think about the future of this track. Of course, this was the third Cup Series race in the current Atlanta configuration. Surface is already starting to get older and might see some similar aging over the next few years, similar to Daytona, Talladega as well. Handling could be a factor more so as we have the potential for some single file breakaways. Will we continue to see this kind of super speedway style pack racing? We did have one tire failure, one big one with Eric Almirola. That was unfortunate, but then again, he was on 70 plus laps old tires. Jonathan, do you believe NASCAR may consider adjusting the package for Atlanta before the next race here when we come back later this season?
Short answer, no. Long answer, no, because I think NASCAR saw a good race out there today, and yeah, I don't think they'll change it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to really. I wanted pretty much the same exact thing Jonathan just said. I don't think they'll change. I think knowing with NASCAR, it's going to be. It takes really a lot out of them to change something like this. And like you said, I mean, thinking about my comments I made, I think the last stage really did save this race. It really wasn't as boring as I think, lack of better term on my part. So I want to apologize about that. I think Jonathan really made me think about it and what you guys said. So I appreciate that. But with Atlanta, I would agree with Adam as well. I kind of miss the old Atlanta. I was excited. I'm not going to lie. I'm sure we can find clips here on Grid Network when I was a rookie, like a real rookie, talking about Atlanta. Like, I'm so excited. I love the fact. And then watching how fast I feel this track aged, it just seems like the way the racing has gone isn't what they thought. However, I'm very happy for Atlanta because you get to see guys like Corey LaJoie finish in the top 5. That's something that's awesome. Drivers you don't really see up front as much being able to be up front. I think he finished 5th in one of the first Atlanta races. I believe he finished 4th today officially. So awesome about that. But I don't believe NASCAR would consider changing the package. I don't think if this race could have been the worst race we had ever seen, I don't think they would change the package, honestly. But yeah, so that's my long answer. Same thing as Jonathan. No.
Yeah, and minus Joey Logano, 9 drivers earned their best finish of 2023. So definitely a track for that.
Absolutely.
Now, well, before we get into our one shining moments for you two, Demas, I think, likes your 75th anniversary shirt there, Jonathan. So we've got that going with a NASCAR theme here. But I understand both of you guys have to head out a little bit earlier this evening. So, Matthew, I'll go to you first and let you get your one shining moments out of the way now. What's your one shining moment from this weekend in motorsports?
It's so tough. It really is. I'm going to probably – there's so many. Just really quick, Max Verstappen going from 15 to 2nd obviously is a big one. Obviously, Logano winning finally with not Scheller Pennzoil. Keselowski being up front. I would say I'm going to go down the road of Spire Motorsports in the sense not so much Corey LaJoie actually finishing one of his best finishes ever, finished 4th, but Ty Dillon now is actually ahead. I know we were not making fun of him, but saying that he's been just not as consistent in that car. He's finally ahead of Pastrana and them jumping up in the points. Ty Dillon finished, I believe, 23rd. That's a great run for that team. And I think that's honestly my one shining moment is seeing Spire Motorsports show up, really. I mean, I know 23rd might not be showing up for the majority of the teams, but the way I feel Ty Dillon has run this season, I'd argue that is a very shining moment for that team. And then obviously, like I said, LaJoie definitely being up in the top 5 is another shining moment for me.
Yeah, I think my one shining moment would be Christian X's win on Saturday. You know, for getting let go from ThorSport to coming over to McAnally Racing, and Bill McAnally being as historic of an owner as he is in the grassroots racing, to finally get that NASCAR win, that's huge. So that's my number one shining moment. My number 2, NASCAR Brazil. They had their first races this weekend. I know the one I was able to catch the second race, or Vitor Gens was able to get the win. If you haven't, go follow NASCAR Brazil. It was some good racing, good action going on there. They have 3 classes: Pro, Pro-Am, Am. Victor Gens won the overall race. Some good racing there.
Well, I will save my one shining moment for the end of the show. We're going to bring Kobe and Casey back on to recap IMSA and the 12 hours of Sebring. But Matthew, Jonathan, thanks again for your contributions to the show tonight. And with that, I guess I will turn it over to Kobe as we lead into the IMSA section.
Thank you, guys.
Always a pleasure, guys.
Thank you, guys. See you next time. And once again, the IMSA Mobile 112 Hours of Sebring delivered drama in the closing stages of this great crown jewel endurance race. 3 GTP drivers were fighting for the overall win. Those three were Philippe Albuquerque, Matthew Jominy, and Felipe Nasr. At the time, Jominy was out front. Albuquerque tried to make a move for the lead on the left of the Porsche factory driver. At the same time, Jominy moved over to the left, and the two drivers collided. Albuquerque went into the grass, back onto the track where he hit Jominy and Felipe Nasr, and some GTD cars piled in. Just like that, a possible 12 hours of Sebring win gone down the drain for the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Autosport Acura and both Porsche 963s from Porsche Penske Motorsport. This handed the overall lead to the pole winning car, the number 31 Whelen Engineering Cadillac from Action Express Racing, who had to battle adversity to get back into the fight. Earlier in the race, an LMP3 car spun an Action Express, crashed into it, suffering damage to the nose with nowhere to go. They clawed and fought their way back to the front, but they had some luck fall in their favor. First, Chip Ganassi Racing, who seemed to have the best car and in control of the race, went up in smoke, caught on fire on pit road. The other one ended up retiring from the race. Sebastian Bourdais walked away from that car absolutely dejected because Ganassi, they had it. They had this race, but unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be. Then you had 6 and 7 not see the finish because of the wreck. Toward the end, BMW M Team RLL had Nick Yellowly try to challenge for the win at the end, but the Action Express are winners again in IMSA competition with Pippo Durrani, Alexander Sims, and Jack Aiken. And now bring Casey on to answer this question. Was the incident between the Acura and the Porsches just an unfortunate racing incident? And is Action Express after it?
But that was a great race. I'm just going to say that right here and right now. But just talking about this event and this, this whole entire race, I think it's going to go down as probably as one of the best, if not the best, 12 hours of Sebring out there that I've ever seen. But yeah, that's just a racing incident. I know Joe and I were talking about it before the show, and it was just, when you're going for the win at the 12 hours of Sebring, that stuff's going to happen. And awkwardly enough, all four GTP cars were all close right next to each other. The 10 got off track, gets into the two Porsches, and then off goes the 31. And he wins the race, and then off we go from there. But yeah, it is definitely it was just a racing incident, in my opinion.
A racing incident, just one of those deals.
Yeah.
One of those deals where they're racing hard, trying to get the win. Definitely just something where you got to feel for the teams that were involved. You could see Wayne Taylor. He was just so frustrated, but he said it was all part of a racing incident. Now, Pippo Durrani, he earned his 4th overall win in the 12 hours of Sebring. He moves into 3rd place all time of winners in this Endurance Classic, 71 run-ins of this race. Durrani is tied with Audi Sports legend Frank Biella. Alan McNish, he's one Sebring win away from tying Ronaldo Capello and 2 away from most all-time Mr. Le Mans, Tom Christian, who has won it 6 times. Amazing. Overall, when thinking about all the great drivers of sports car racing, does Pippo Durrani not get the respect he deserves, in your opinion?
I mean, the dynamo, it's Pippo Durrani. I mean, just to see where that team has kind of come from. And Action Express really needed a good race. And, Kobe and I were talking about it on the Grid Live pre-race show for the 12 hours of Sebring. It's like, coming into this race, we felt like, they needed a good race because they didn't win at all in 2022. And, it's like if Chip Ganassi likes winners, Action Express likes Gary Nelson likes trophies. Yes, and Scott McLaughlin won in his 2nd IMSA start. That's impressive. Good for Tower Motorsports and LMP2. And might as well just recap all the winners. So Action Express took it in GTP. In LMP2, it was Tower Motorsports in the number 8. In LMP3, it was the 74 Riley Motorsports. The 9 Pfaff Motorsports team took it in GTD Pro. And in GTD, what a battle there. It was Paul Miller Racing that took it, and a 1-2 for BMW as we kind of saw that with the Turner car, and then Alexis just gets in Lexus gets in the way of the Turner car, and then just it's like, yep, that was kind of the story of the day for you know, I mean, I thought I thought the 96 could have was able to get there, but to go back to your original question, and I see Kobe's back on the screen now. I do think the Dynamo does not get the respect that he deserves out there, but yeah, Action Express is back, and Pippo Durrani is back in victory lane.
Casey, I think I need to switch my internet to Xfinity 10G because this is getting absolutely ridiculous. While I was backstage, my internet was working perfectly. Didn't know one moment I come on the screen, it decides to let me down. So I'm really getting annoyed with all of this. Like I'm really fed up. But enough with that. And to answer the questions that were already asked.
Hey, neighbor.
Casey, not now. Save it for after the show. But I'll just go ahead and answer the questions that were already asked right quick. As far as the incident between the Acuras and the Porsches, as Porsche Penske Motorsport, the director of that program said on the NBC broadcast, he thought it was just a race, and as frustrated as he was, he didn't blame the 10 at all. Just thought it was a hard race incident, and totally agree with him there. It was unfortunate that the top three at the time end up taking each other out, but unfortunately, when you're racing hard for a crown jewel victory, that just happens in endurance racing. And Action Express, great win for Pippo Durrani, Alexander Sims, and Jack Aiken. I know at the end a lot of people were questioning, why did they have Jack Aiken in the car finishing this race? Why don't they have someone like Pippo Durrani in that car? But Jack Aiken proved he can hang with the big dogs in IMSA. And I think his stock just went up by a lot in sports car racing. That was a great job at the end by Aiken, with all the great fights out on the racetrack. And Action Express, kudos to them for getting back at the top step of the podium in victory lane. It's been a while. Last time they won was 2021. Good to see that team back, and we'll see if they can make a push for the championship this year. And in regards to Pippo Durrani, it's quite impressive what he's been able to do. It's crazy. The guy is not even 30 years old yet, and he's already third on the all-time list of overall winners in the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring. I totally agree with you, Casey. Pippo Dynamo Durrani does not get the respect that he deserves. He's turning into a young legend right now in sports car racing. He's won the Rolex 24. He's won Sebring 4 times. He's won the 6 Hours of the Glen. He's even won Petit Le Mans. The only thing he's really missing is winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans overall, and he's going to get to potentially do that this year with Action Express Racing. So a lot of these drivers in sports car racing spends their entire careers trying to win these crown jewel events, and they never end up getting there. But Durrani, he's basically won all of them except for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. We'll see if he'll be able to get that done. And before the big wreck between the Acuras and Porsches, that the top 5 positions overall were looking to be swept by the GTP class. Those 3 retirements opened the door for an LMP2 car to finish on the overall podium, and the LMP2 class winner was the number 8 from Tower Motorsports with drivers Scott McLaughlin, Kevin Simpson, and John Ferrano. Like Action Express, Tower had to battle back from adversity when Simpson had a big off and damaged the car early in the race. Ultimately, it was McLaughlin who took the checker flag at the end, holding off Mikkel Jensen from TDS Racing. Casey, how impressive is it for an LMP2 not to just win in class, but finish on the overall podium? And could McLaughlin put himself in the conversation for a future Porsche GTP seat, given the Penske connection?
I mean, you look at LMP2 and really that class was just that class was insane. So just, yeah, I mean, it was really impressive because this is what happens in a 12-hour race. You can find your way back. And I didn't think the Tower Motorsports car would find its way back, but it did. So, and obviously it set up a battle. I mean, you look at all the cars that had issues today. I mean, you look at the 52, you had the 11, you had just tons of battles out there. And like I said, the Sebring is just Sebring. You got to respect the bumps. You got to respect the track. And, sometimes those wins will come back to you. I mean, how about Kiffin Simpson after what he's been through, to get that win after all that? That was pretty good. And by the way, I hope a lot of people put a lot of respect on sports car racing, especially here in America, because IMSA is where it's at. It is worth your time and your money.
Yeah, definitely. It was worth all 12 hours. It was worth all 24 at Daytona. It's going to be worth all 6 when we get to the Glen, and all 10 when we get to Motul Petit Le Mans at the end of the year. And that was quite an impressive comeback from Tower Motorsport. Thought Kiffin Simpson did a really good job when he was in the car. Minus that one little misdemeanor, as Scotty Mack said on TV. Yesterday. And John Ferrano, gentleman driver of that program, he did a really good job during his stints, able to meet the minimum drive time there, and then the two faster drivers, McLaughlin and Simpson, and ended up putting the chunk of the work to get them where they're supposed to be. And thinking about the future Porsche GTP seat, I think Scott McLaughlin, as he get used to these prototypes, he very well could put him in the conversation for that. I don't know if Porsche Penske Motorsport would have a place for him on their roster, but Porsche, they're going to be handing out some customer cars. So if McLaughlin wants to hop in a customer Porsche, I'm sure that wouldn't be a problem at all. Proton's planning to bring a customer car later this year. I believe they plan. Sports Cars 365 reported they plan to bring it at Road America, and then JDC Miller Motorsports, they're trying to bring their Porsche around, I think it's Laguna Seca, before we head off before the Le Mans break. So Scotty Mack's doing a really good job in his early days of prototypes, and we'll see if this leads to something bigger and better, going for overall wins in GTP. Casey, do you want to add an additional point?
Well, I mean, here's the thing, though. You also have an IndyCar career. You never know where Scotty Mack's career is going to go. There's a lot of places that you can be, but I think he's pretty comfortable in IndyCar right now. But obviously, you have all these endurance races, whether it's in IMSA or whether it's in WEC. Obviously, the connection that everything's kind of coming together now. But it's definitely there. Drivers can be IndyCar drivers are mostly sports car drivers too. So it is definitely good to see that those two series are kind of coming together with this with sports car racing. And I think we possibly could see that. And what a great finish overall in all 5 classes.
Yeah, definitely a great finish in all 5 classes. In case I know you did a rundown on winners, but doing one final look at those, Raleigh Motorsports bounced back like we correctly predicted on our IMSA pre-race show to win an LMP3. Great win for Felipe Fraga, Gar Robinson, and Josh Burton. The BOP was much better this time around. We saw Pfaff Motorsports Porsche win GTD Pro with Patrick Pilet, Klaus Bachler, Lawrence Van Thor. GTD went to the number 1, Paul Miller Racing BMW, Brian Sellers, Madison Snow, and Corey Lewis. In the next IMSA race will take place on April 16th at the most iconic street circuit in America, the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach, with GTP, GTD Pro, and GTD classes in action.
Yeah.
And
also, one more thing. Also, WEC is that weekend too. The 6 hours of Portimao is that weekend, the second race of the World Endurance Championship too. So going to be a busy week of sports car racing, and also going to be a busy week for the Grid EPI. So our good friend Matt White from Grid Tonight is going to be very, very busy the next few months because it's going to be tons and tons of racing.
Yeah, definitely a ton of racing to follow today as well. Typically on days like today, we just have NASCAR and Formula One, but we also have World Rally Championship. Typically by the time NASCAR rolls around, World Rally Championship is done, but they ran the Rally Mexico. So it was finishing up, like around the same time where all of our other races are going on. And in Rally Mexico, we saw the first 3 days in with different leaders. Tonic led on the first day, but he was off the pace. The second day, losing the lead to Esapeka Lapie. But on the second day, Lapie crashed out of the first stage while leading and brought down a power pole. So if you haven't seen that, please go onto social media. It's like one of the scariest crashes I have ever seen from any form of motorsport. I'm really happy that he's okay. And that brought out the red flag for that stage, as the local authorities had to deal with the down power lines of the pole and the hybrid race car. This handed the lead over to the great legend of World Rally Championship competition, Sebastian Ogier, who ended the third day of competition with a 35-second lead over Elfyn Evans. In the end, nobody had anything for Ogier. He's a perfect 2-0 in his select World Rally Championship starts. He didn't race at Rally Sweden, but still leads the WRC standings. Second place is Thierry Neuville. 2 third-place finishes in second place in Mexico. Kali Rovanpera, the defending champ, is 1 point behind Neuville, and Tonic is 6 behind. And now bringing Joe Samaniego back in. Could World Rally Championship be a championship battle that could be competitive once we get further into the season? It's really crazy that, Ogier is not even running full time and he's leading.
He's leading after just 2 races, but 2 wins. The thing is, I do predict this championship is going to be one championship where if you haven't followed World Rally Championship in the past, you got to check it out this year because I think the competition is pretty close. As you mentioned, Thierry Neuville, he is knocking on the door for a win. Kali Ruffin-Pera, he will love to prove he could be a 2-time World Rally Championship. You see, the two of them, 1 point. Ott Tanak, he is not far behind after a great race weekend at Sweden. Those three different manufacturers, the 3 that do make up Rally 1, battling out, I think this is going to be a really exciting season. We know Sebastian Ogier is not doing the full season, so I will be completely shocked if he was to just somehow keep the lead if he wants to win every single race and everybody else had bad luck. Thierry Neuville, the Hyundai, this is a great opportunity to forget that championship. Kali Ruffin-Pera, Toyota, they want to get another championship in a row, prove their dominance. And Ott Tanak, you can't count him out. You can't count out Elfyn Evans, who had a great race weekend here in Mexico, was in second place pretty much all race long until he fell behind later in the day. It's going to be a fun rally championship season. I think it's going to be setting up for one of the better ones. And I think when you look at all the series in the grid ranking, this is a championship where I feel a lot of people are thinking it's just going to be a Toyota Gazoo rally team dominating it. I think there's potential for a classic three-way battle between 3 drivers from 3 different teams. Can't get any better than that.
Yeah, definitely. It would be really exciting to see a very competitive battle for the World Rally Championship because, typically we see one driver run away with the championship, and to be able to get 3 drivers battling for the championship all year long, that would be a dream come true. And I have to wonder, after going 2-0 in the select starts, does Sebastian Ogier want to change his mind and run the rest of the season because he could pick up another championship here? But in all seriousness, I know he's only running a part-time schedule because he wants to step back, spend time with his family, just pick and choose the events that he likes. I think it's highly unlikely that Sebastian Ogier all of a sudden decides that, hey, I want to run for the championship now because I'm leading, and looking at things and logistics and how all that works. It's not so easy to be like, I'm changing my mind. I want to go full time now because with these racing teams, that they set a budget, they get their program in place, and they typically stick to it instead of being like, we're gonna add him on full time. But very, very impressive to see what Ogier has been able to continue to do throughout the years in rally competition. And looking at our next round for World Rally Championship is going to be April 20th through 23rd. Rally Croatia will be well into the grid ranking and EPI at that point.
As you said, we are 2 Sundays away from the 7th annual grid ranking, week number 1. It's going to be very exciting. First Sunday of April. And depending on what happens with Triple Eight racing, it's going to be very interesting to see where Shane Van Gisbergen comes in. If that appeal is reversed and he has 2 wins, very likely he'll be up at the top, especially since Max Verstappen got a second place finish in Saudi Arabia. But still, it'll be really close considering Max has gotten a first place, a second place, and he has a pole and a huge effort going from 15th to second place, so that earned him some bonus points as well. One of the big things, Kobe, bringing you back in, we know there's some other series like IndyCar, MotoGP, they have not completed a 2 race minimum to be scored yet. Formula 1, along with Formula E, NASCAR, Supercars, and World Rally have all done that. But when I look at Formula E, NASCAR, and Supercars, I don't see a dominant driver like you do in F1 and the Supercar series. SVG, Max Verstappen, they topped our preseason poll. Coming down towards the first race weekend, which Red Bull driver you believe is going to have a harder time with the competition throughout the season, SVG or Max Verstappen?
Wow, that is a really good question. That is a very difficult one to answer, to be honest. Can I just say neither? Because SVG, best driver in the series, in the best car. Max Verstappen, best driver in Formula One right now, in the best car. I don't really see them losing too many races this season. It's honestly really hard to say who's going to have a much harder time with the competition. I guess I'd say it'd be a little bit harder for SVG, considering the fact that they've switched over to a new set of regulations with the Gen 3 car, and we saw the disqualification happen and that. So I think I think supercars is certainly much more competitive than Formula One. So I guess, and it sounds really crazy because SVG, he is on another planet right now in supercars, but I would probably have to pick him over Verstappen, who would have the harder time. That's really saying something. But overall, I think both of the drivers are going to end up being champions of their respective series at the end of the year.
I would have to agree. I think both of them are looking to be prospective champions in this season, their respective series. The big thing I feel, Shane Van Gisbergen already won 2 races done in 1 race weekend, and he could have been easily a 2-time winner. He just seems to be on another level. Max Verstappen, yes, he did come from 15th to 2nd place. If Sergio Perez was not the leader there, I'm pretty convinced it would have been a Max Verstappen win, because he probably would have gotten around whether it was the Ferraris, the Mercedes, or Alonso and the Aston Martin. But it was his teammate who put together a great race to stay up front and take the win. So yeah, overall, I think it's going to be something where Max Verstappen, the competition is going to be tough, but I think his route might be just a little bit easier, especially what he showed he could do. And of course, I know you, Casey, Matthew, the Grid Endurance Performance Index. And this was the first weekend where we had the WEC, IMSA, both at the same track. So the first weekend for the hypercars to see them run in each of their respective series. Did anything stood out to you when you were watching them, considering it's GTP and IMSA, LMH, all on the same track but different races? Anything stood out?
I said, well, starting with IMSA, I have to give kudos to IMSA for the BOP in the GTP class, because all of the manufacturers are within 0.4 apart from each other. So that is super impressive to me to see all the manufacturers have a fighting chance. I know BMW didn't really have the ultimate pace, but they were still in the fight. Nick Yellowy had a shot to get Jack Aiken there at the end, but ultimately BMW just did not have. I think they're missing just a little bit. And I think by the time we get to Long Beach and, later in the season, Laguna Seca, especially, after the break, when we get back for 6 hours of Laguna, I think we're going to see BMW get even closer. Yeah. So I think right now IMSA has to certainly be satisfied with GTP after 2 races. I remember in the preseason, we were really concerned about this hybrid system, because if you follow IMSA testing over the offseason, they had a lot of issues with the hybrid system. So it's nice to see them survive a 24-hour race, a 12-hour race without any significant issues there. And on the World Endurance Championship side, as we said on the pre-race show, recapping this, Casey, Toyota Gazoo Racing just doing Toyota Gazoo racing things, continuing to dominate that championship. Is still going to run through them, but I still don't think it's going to be a total cakewalk. I think the other manufacturers are going to catch up to Toyota, because while Toyota has controlled top flight prototype racing in the World Endurance Championship, the competition is much tougher. And Toyota right now, they're relying on all of their experience, but I think once the other manufacturers get more laps under their belt, continuing to develop their programs, and maybe with some help through more favorable BOP adjustments, we could see other manufacturers in the World Endurance Championship as well get up there with Toyota. And as far as them, so we don't have any hypercars that are racing there right now. Hopefully we'll get some next season. I know Risi Competizione has stated that they're very interested in getting a hypercar from Ferrari, possibly for next year's Rolex 24. Don't know if we're going to see a hypercar in IMSA competition by the end of 2023, but I'm sure at some point we're going to see a hypercar in IMSA.
No, I think we will. The big impressive thing that I saw this weekend, well, Toyota Gazoo Racing being Toyota Gazoo Racing, no one should be surprised about that. The other thing it was, besides an LMP3 car getting into a Porsche during the 12 hours of Sebring, that surprised me a little bit. But overall, I just think just the reliability of these cars throughout in the 12 hours of Sebring. I think we've only had 2 retirement. I mean, obviously this was said before all the carnage, but the thing is, it's like 3 of them were caused accidents, and then the 0-1 with the fire. I think we've only had like 2 or 3 retirements happen with this. So this has been pretty impressive. And like we said before, they'll figure this out. And obviously they have the 2 longest races of the season. Now, a lot of these cars will probably run at the 24 hours of Le Mans, but we also have a 6-hour race and a 10-hour race on the schedule. And the rest are either going to be 2-hour races or the sprint race at Long Beach.
Going to be very exciting. Overall, seeing all the cars in Sebring this weekend, just very exciting, and I cannot wait for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Of course, be sure to follow us right here on YouTube, the Grid Endurance Performance Index, April 12th on Grid Tonight, the first week standards, and every Wednesday, Matthew from Grid API will be there. Casey, I know that's going to be a shining moment when we see who leads the first weekend, but now it's time for this weekend's shining moment.
And of course, so the one shining moment is throughout all of motorsports weekend. Of course, we've had a lot of them, with World Rallycross and the 12 Hours of Sebring and WEC and Formula One and NASCAR. All of it happened this weekend. And also, also Xfinity and trucks as well. If you want to, if you can't make the encore show, might as well put those in there as well. But leave your one shining moment in the chat right now. But first, I am going to throw it to you, Ben. What's your one shining moment from this weekend in motorsports?
I guess there's a lot to pick from, isn't there? But I'm going to go with my pick a winner for the Cup Series. He did very well. Almost got me the pick a winner point. Was right up there fighting for it at the end. Could have gone either way. But if there's anybody that I think is justified in liking the new Atlanta, it's certainly Corey LaJoie. 5th place here in the spring last year, in contention for the win. Unfortunately, had that deal with Chase Elliott where he got put into the fence on the last lap there. But that easily could have been a win, if not certainly a top 5 in that race. And then another top 5 today with a 4th place run. Corey LaJoie and Spire Motorsports, I think, are headed in the right direction. They love this place. This is my one shining moment to see them have a good run today. Great momentum boost for that team. Corey LaJoie, that's my one shining moment today.
Yeah, and Corey LaJoie is actually 14th in points right now. So to see, if the playoffs started today, he would be there. So it's really impressive to see what Spire Motorsports has been able to do so far this season. We'll see if the good times are going to be rolling later on, because we have Talladega coming up, and then we have another Atlanta, and then got Daytona to close out the regular season. But my one shining moment, I'm going to give it to Pippo Durrani and Action Express Racing from the Mobil 1 12 Hours of Sebring. And seeing where Action Express was last year to where they are now, they've had a lot of people doubting if they could get back to where they were when they won the championship in 2021. And 2022, not a good year at all for them. And to go out there and win the 12 Hours of Sebring, and yeah, I know they had some help with the top 3 in GTP taking each other out in the closing minutes, but they were able to capitalize on it. Sometimes in motorsports, you just need luck to fall your way, and it fell in favor of Action Express Racing. And as I said, we'll see if they can build off of this great Sebring win. And Pippo Durrani, yeah, you can't say enough about him and the work that he's been able to do. I think it is just super impressive that he's just 29 right now, and he's won Sebring 4 times. He's only trailing Ronaldo Capello and the great Alan McNeil. He's actually trailing at the very top Tom Christensen, Mr. Lamar. We'll see if he's able to get 6 wins in the future, but he's still young, hadn't even hit his 30s, and he has a lot of time on his hands. And we know in sports car racing, you can see drivers race well into their 40s and 50s, so he has plenty of years left in his career.
Yeah, it was good to see Tom Christensen on the NBC broadcast, calling in from his home in Denmark. So that was pretty cool. Joe, what is your one shining moment from this weekend in motorsports?
My one shining moment comes from World Rally Championship, and it has to be that they're back in Mexico. They were not there last year, and one of the phenomenal things, especially if you haven't watched it, check out the first stage. They run through the downtown streets under the lights. They do 2 laps around a roundabout there. It is just phenomenal. Seeing the crowd, the flash bulbs, well, a lot of cameras. There's no longer cameras with flash bulbs as much as back then. But just seeing that, the fun atmosphere, overall, it's just great to see World Rally Championship back in North America again. Hopefully we could someday see World Rally Championship in the United States. That's my one shining moment, World Rally Championship, Rally Mexico, especially that first stage. Encourage everyone, check out those highlights. And it was a great mural for Ken Block in that stage as well.
Absolutely. All right, I have 2 one shining moments. One's going to go to the whole 12 Hours of Sebring. Sebring is the greatest. I just think it was just a great weekend for sports car racing. For Super Sebring with the 1,000 miles of Sebring, and then of course the 12 Hours of Sebring. So both great races. And then since I'm not going to be on the Encore show Monday, I'm going to give my Encore one shining moment to Christian Eckes and Bill McAnally Racing. They picked up their first win as a Truck Series team this weekend at Atlanta. McAnally Hilgeman Racing, of course, that team with Christian Eckes in the 19 truck. I'm going to say this, that 19 is fast, and he's been the top truck all season long. MHR is going to have a lot of things to work on this season, because they are very good. I think they are the team to beat right now. The Chevrolets are fast. Zane Smith is fast as well. Who knows what the Toyota? I think we might see something out of Tricon Garage, but I think definitely it's going to be the next 4 weeks are really going to tell where everybody's at. And of course, Taylor Gray will be making his full-time Truck Series debut in the 17. Of course, had to wait 3 races, but now that he's old enough, his birthday is actually on the COTA race day, so he'll be taking over the 17 the rest of the season as he decides to go for a championship. And I think he could do some very, very big things in that 17 truck.
First win is always very big deal. Of course,
Absolutely.
for everyone, all our viewers, a very big deal is if you got a pick a winner correct. Kobe, as well as Casey Campbell, they both got a correct guess and pick a winner today. A couple other folks did. A lot of folks banked on Max Verstappen, but that did not turn out to be, as Max Verstappen did not get the win. But we did see one person did pick Sergio Perez to get the win, and Kobe's starting to get up there, 2 behind Ed Hunter. Ed Hunter got nobody correct. It's just going to be, I think, really fun to see. We got 19 folks in pick a winner. How many other folks would join in? And now Casey's on the board.
Yeah.
First correct pick a winner.
Yeah, Kobe got the pick a winner correct on the 31 Wheeling Cadillac. So that was a good pick by you, Kobe. The Dynamo's back in victory lane, and Jack Aiken coming from Formula One in Williams. I got a chance to talk with him on my channel. If anyone wants a great interview, Jack Aiken is one of the best to talk with. Anyone that you can talk to that came from Formula One is always a good get, and no matter who it is. So it was good to talk to Jack earlier in the year. Hopefully I get a chance to talk with him later on in this year. So next race will be at the 6 Hours at the Glen. So I know he's excited about that.
I never know what to do, because sometimes I wait until right before the race to give my picks, but then I've missed out on World Rally Championship in the first of 2 or 3 Supercars races or whatever. So this week I got my picks in as soon as the tweet went up, and I was actually on the pre-race show. Normally I'm not on the pre-race show, but I'd locked my picks in, and then Max Verstappen had his qualifying issue. I might have gone with Checo Perez instead if I had waited a little bit longer. So it seems like no matter what I do, I can't close that gap to Ed. He's still leading all of us here, but Kobe is closing the gap. So we'll see how it plays out. Of course, we got plenty more races to go in this 2023 season.
Oh yeah, big time, because I just made all my picks on grid tonight, so that's what I do. So
yeah, we can't let our Formula E specialist beat us. That's my one thing. The guy really knowledgeable about Formula E, and he doesn't. I know he doesn't really follow all of the other series as closely as we do, but if he's able to beat us all and pick a winner, we should probably just all log off and get off of here, because we don't know what we're doing at all. But on a serious note, it's really nice to see the pick a winner board really filling up this year, and especially so early in the season. I remember when Joe and I first started doing this in 2020, that pick a winner board, we had hardly anyone on there, and it just shows the growth that we've been able to do here at Grid Network, and really appreciate everyone who's come on board the last several months, and people have been supporting us for a very long time. We're all very, very appreciative of that.
Yeah. And let's give Ed some credit, because I know, like you said, Kobe, he's really our Formula E expert and specialist here. He doesn't follow all of those series as closely as he does Formula E or even Formula One. But he's obviously committed to make sure he gets his picks in for every series, every race weekend this year, or at least the start of this year, and it's paid off for him. So it's good to see.
And speaking of Formula E, they get going this weekend at Sao Paulo, so that's going to be a big weekend there. Going to be a massive weekend if you're talking about picks. We have Joe, you guys help me out here. We got NASCAR at COTA. We have MotoGP kicks off this weekend. So that will be exciting for sure. Formula E. So 3 big races there. Am I missing anything?
Those are the big 3 next weekend. But of course, MotoGP is just the debut of their sprint race weekend. So we got a Saturday sprint race.
Oh boy.
That's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah, that's gonna be problematic.
Yeah, that's not going to be. I can already see our own Joshua Birch going, "Oh no, I just can't even think about that." If you think Joshua Birch is going to get mad at this, mad at Cup drivers being in the Xfinity and truck race, and by the way, from what I'm hearing, there's going to be a ton of them in both series, so he's going to get mad over this too. So, Josh, I hope you're feeling better, buddy. I know that Josh is a little under the weather right now, so hope you're feeling better, Josh.
Definitely, it's going to be really exciting. One thing with Pick a Winner is it has, as Kobe said, really grown, and we thank everyone for participating in it. Always a lot of fun. And be sure to follow us on social media. Each and every week, we're posting content on all our social media accounts. You can find links in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us right here on YouTube. That's the big thing. Hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of the upcoming programs with Grid Life Encore. We have recap of the Atlanta race weekend for the Craftsman Truck Series. And on Wednesday will be Grid Tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday. And then Friday, we have the Women in Motorsports, Dorian Pin, getting a podium at Sebring. That's going to be one of the big top stories. And of course, this is all made possible thanks to our Patreon subscribers, Colin Show, Mark, Robin, and David, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You could invest in us as little as $5 a month. That'll help us go a long way on the air and at the track. And of course, you could do one time, buy me a coffee. You set the amount. You could even make it for a specific on-air personality here on the Grid Network and contribute to the growth of the Grid Network. For Casey Campbell, Ben Schneider, and Kobe Lambeth from the Podium Finish, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.